Afternoon, everybody. I hope this afternoon you're all keeping well. Thank you all for joining into today's session. My name is Daniela. I am an account manager at Kaelo. I've got a background in psychology. I am joined today by Lisa Berger. Lisa, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Dan. And I am feeling honored and privileged to be here today with you on this topic that really has sort of opened my eyes the more that we've dug into the research, and it's helped me to better understand what's been going on with me as we're moving into the autumn season. And so Danny and I have spent quite a bit of time putting together the research around what shifts and changes happen in our body. And so, as you would have noticed for yourselves, temperature's starting to change, the days are getting shorter, and so how do we become more mindful of what's going on around us in order to take better care of our mental health? So for those of you who like a little bit of structure, I think let's kick off, Danny, with just sharing an outline of what we're wanting to cover this afternoon. Thank you for the comments that we're receiving in the chat, and lovely to get everybody just to drop in a greeting. And I see some of you are excited about the topic. I hope you're going to enjoy it as much as Danny and I have, learning more and more about what's happening and how do we do small little tweaks to our daily practices in order to be more in tune with ourselves, with the season and nature. And so without further ado, this is what we want to share with you this afternoon. The first piece is around circadian rhythms and better understanding what this circadian rhythm is and the fact that this actually rules our bodies. We're going to look at some of the symptoms that present themselves, that maybe we write them off to other things, but things that are out of rhythm. And what are the recommendations that we have for you to bring ourselves back into the natural flow and ebb and flow of our energy as we roll in from summer into autumn and ultimately into winter? And then we'll do a quick short wrap up. Alrighty, thanks, Dan. And so just to bring you back to the seasons of nature and our natural cycles of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, so our bodies also adapt and change in response to the different seasons. And of course, there are certain differences between the southern hemisphere and the northern.
It seems we've lost sound on Lisa's side, so I'll pick up there where she's taken off. I just want to get an understanding in the chat box. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So as Lisa was saying, just some of the things we wanted to chat through today is how the seasons change and how our bodies ebb and flow with the seasons. Our bodies have got a natural rhythm in them, and whether we pay attention to them or not, they're still there. As does nature. So as we go into winter, as we go into autumn, all the leaves fall off of the trees. Things become a little bit calmer. There's a quietness leading into autumn. As we go into winter, animals go into hibernation. Human beings should also be going into some sort of quiet hibernation as well. Leading into summer, into spring, There's new flowers coming through. Human beings have got this innate creativity that comes through in the spring months. There's a renewed sense of joy. It's generally when we like to do, for the corporate clients, generally like to do their wellness days during the spring season. Time for change, time for new growth, new experiences, leading into summer, really hounding into those experiences as well. Now, our nature is reset on a daily basis through the sun. It's set on an annual basis through the seasons. In saying that, human beings also have a natural setting. Human beings reset on what's called the circadian rhythm. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard about the circadian rhythm before, but basically what it's saying is that your body's natural chemicals and natural energy levels fluctuate through the day. You may be aware of this, you may have noticed this before, but generally when we wake up in the morning, we're feeling a little bit calm, rested. We're at our lowest body temperature at around 4:30 in the morning. Generally, people wake up at about 6. They have a sharp blood pressure rise at 6:45 in the morning. These are generally speaking. Our bowel movements generally happen at about 8 o'clock in the morning. It's between 6 and 8 o'clock where we recommend to get that boost of vitamin D, that exposure to sunlight in the morning. We then have our highest testosterone secretion at around 9 o'clock. Our highest alertness is about 10 o'clock. So for those of us who go into meetings during the day, if you've got a meeting where you really got to be on it and stay active, recommend you doing that at 10 o'clock in the morning. Then we go into about the afternoon time at around 2:30. We've got our best coordination. So if you're going to go and play sports, it's a good time to do that. Our fastest reaction time is at about 3 o'clock. Just before that, there is generally a dip in your sugar levels for most people. I know for myself, it's generally the case. About 3 o'clock, my body tells me when it's 3 o'clock because it needs either a cup of tea or something sweet to just pep me up again. At about 5 o'clock, then we have our greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. So it's the best time of the day to then go and do some exercise. At about 6:30, we're looking at high blood pressure and your highest temperature sitting at around 7 o'clock, leading into the evening, getting your body nice and warm for your night's rest. And your melatonin secretion, which is it's a hormone in your body that sends messages to your brain to start resting and get some sleep. It's generally bothered by things like your cell phone, but it's also impacted by if you haven't gotten that first 2 hours of sunlight in the morning, that could be impacted, affecting how you go to bed at night.
So something, Jan, if I could just, I'm back. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. But if I could just come in there and add to what you were saying about our cell phones. So the morning sun carries a blue light that impacts our wakefulness. And when we're sitting at night before we go to sleep, looking at our phones, the same blue light is sending messages to our brain that it's waking up time. And so an hour before you go to sleep, it is a good idea to put your phone down, all screens down, so that your brain can start producing melatonin so that you can go to sleep. And I wonder how many of us are having impaired sleep because of our sitting on our laptops working till late at night. And so Rocco, I see your comment in the chat, sharp blood pressure rise at 6:30 when you open your Outlook. Yes, so that would, if we're opening our Outlook before we've had some sunlight in our eyes, this will definitely rise blood pressure in a way that is less than ideal. And in that case, I'd like to suggest some deep belly breathing exercises to address that sharp rise in blood pressure or to negate it. Thanks, Danny. And so our next slide is really about just reminding you that in your first hour to 2 hours of waking up, how critical it is that we set our circadian rhythm. So it actually helps us to produce better energy, a better mood, and in fact, it helps us with getting a better night's sleep. Now, many of us, as we're going into winter, I know for myself, particularly if I'm driving into the office every day, I'm leaving home in the dark and I'm coming home in the dark. And if I don't get mindful and intentional about taking a walk during the morning to get outside and get some sunlight, I'm throwing my circadian rhythm off. So we can't emphasize more how important it is to get a little bit of sunlight. And we don't mean staring directly into the sun, because this is going to do harm and damage to your eyes. So you could just be sitting next to a window and eyes glanced at the floor. You don't have to be looking directly at the sun. Please don't look directly at the sun. If I could emphasize that. The other thing that Danny and I looked at, we found really interesting, was how different psychological or mental illnesses show up differently over different seasons. And this graph is taken from the Northern Hemisphere, although we have discovered that we have much the same patterns here according to the seasons. So if we look at winter and autumn, we start to see depression and higher rises in reported cases of schizophrenia, and in some cases it's schizophrenic hospitalizations, and first episode onsets tend to happen more in winter. If we don't address some of these mental conditions that happen in the winter, we sometimes see a spike in suicide attempts going into spring. Interestingly enough, more people report triggers of manic episodes if they have bipolar disorder in spring and summer. So it seems like there's a better mood that starts to take place in the warmer seasons. And so as we're moving from summer into autumn, we need to guard against triggering depression. And Danny, I think you've got a really interesting fact that you're going to share with us around what some of the health trends are as we go into it.
Thanks, Lisa. Leads quite well into this. So considering our depressions are higher in the winter months, it could lead to a lot of things, and a lot of things could lead to that. Numerous studies have also shown that death rates peak around this time of the year because of blood pressure. Blood pressure increases during the winter time, and by some reckonings up to 70%. And that could be traced back to things like heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular causes of death. And in the flu, of course, we've got things like in the winter, we've got things like flu, which spread viruses more easily as well. Or viruses are spread more easily as well.
And Danny, if we think about COVID over the last 3 years, we've seen most of our peaks have been in winter. When in the colder seasons, viruses are far more airborne, and they actually survive longer in the colder air.
100%. 100%.
So Danny, can you tell us?
Thanks, Lisa. A couple of the other symptoms that we found as well is your skin and your hair is also impacted in the winter. And it doesn't matter what color your skin is or what kind of hair you have, everybody's hair is impacted and everybody's skin is impacted by getting more dry during the winter. Your scalp generally gets a little itchier and flakier during the winter as well. There's lower humidity during the winter months as well, which could be caused to that. Another interesting fact around that is that the network of blood vessels closest to your skin actually constrict during the winter months and send blood closer to your vital organs. Your blood is thicker during the winter months as well, and that could also lead to those symptoms. As mentioned, our cold and flus rise during the winter months. There's actually a doctor in the US that did a study on it, and she reckoned that we don't actually get sick because of the cold air, but because viruses, as Lisa mentioned, are more susceptible to last longer within the cold air and drier air. They're around more in the cold months. If you're prone to things like arthritis, you may experience a higher level of joint pain during the winter months. That's really because that blood flow stops, as much blood flow is stopped around your joints, leading more to your vital organs. There's some higher cardiovascular risks as well. So the Harvard Health released an article, and they mentioned that our breathing actually becomes shallower during the winter months. Our blood vessels, as mentioned, constrict and your blood thickens. Things like cholesterol are higher in your winter months as well. Your body also goes into an insulin resistance during the winter months, and I'll speak a little bit about that in the next slide. We also go into vitamin D deficiency, and that's really because of the lack of access to sunlight or less sunlight. So within South Africa, as mentioned, we go to work in the dark, we come home in the dark during our winter months. We're not getting that vitamin D, that vital vitamin D, which in the summer months we get in the car on the way to work, just driving to work. So we don't realize the impact of that on our body. There's a study done in the US by the John Hopkins Center for Prevention of Heart Disease that mentioned it was a study done by 2.8 million adults. The researchers found that less sunlight plays a role in the higher levels of cholesterol during the winter months as well. Things like your dopamine and your serotonin are also impacted in these months, dopamine being your happy hormone, and serotonin is the hormone that regulates your mood. Those are also decreased in the winter months as well.
Sure.
Some other cool facts, and maybe a little bit less known or less common. So there's an article published by the journal published by Nature Communications, found that 23% of human DNA actually changes from season to season as well. And this is mostly to boost your immune system for the winter months. Around this time of year, people are prone to colds and flus, and your bodies are trying to fight off infections. And so in doing that, your body actually turns on some pro-inflammatory genes during the winter months. Now, while inflammations are good because they help us fight off infections, too much inflammation leads to heart diseases, diabetes, or some stress-related mental health issues as well. Now, this could potentially be another reason for our higher deaths of cardiovascular deaths during the winter months. I've put this picture here to sort of put into perspective or simplify what I've just told you now. But I want to point out that the impacts that happen during the winter months, being the dry skin, the cardiovascular risks, and so on, there are also impacts during the summer months as well. So during the summer months, our heart rate also increases, our blood pressure decreases in the summer months, where it increases in the winter months. And that's because of that vasoconstriction. We sweat more in the summer, and we are more prone to dehydration in the summer.
Actually, Dan, and also in winter, we tend to drink less water. We reach for coffee and hot chocolate before we drink water. And so we also become dehydrated in the winter.
Yeah, 100%. So things like physical activity go down in the winter months, and that's got a long list of impacts on itself. There's a major dietary change that a lot of people go through during the winter months. We start to crave things like carbohydrates, we crave more full foods, and eat less fresh fruits and vegetables.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Me too. It's nice to have a soup with a slice of toast or a slice of bread, and the most unhealthy bread you can find, the better. It sort of feels like sometimes. Lisa, I wonder, what do you think we could do about all of this?
All right, so a couple of things that are quick, easy things to do. Small tweaks that we can build into our day-to-day routine. So moisturizing our skin, and whether you want to do that by lathering yourself with like a body butter or taking a bath, that actually could switch on our parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system. By taking a bath, you can pop in a little bit of tissue oil or baby oil or even coconut oil. This will moisturize your skin while you're relaxing. As I mentioned earlier to Rocco, diaphragmatic breathing. So really getting conscious about breathing more using our diaphragm. We did do a webinar on deep belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. So if you're interested in that, we can pop the link in there so that you guys can check that out. Keeping our exercise regime is really important. Many of us just stop doing exercise, and this is one of the things that drops our dopamine and serotonin levels. But we may find that our exercise regime needs to be tweaked. And instead of doing such high impact cardio, you may want to do one or two more slower types of exercise like yoga or stretching. Just being mindful that our bodies do tend to have less energy in the winter. But less energy doesn't mean no more exercise. As you mentioned, eating more fruits and vegetables that are grown locally. What tends to happen with most of us doing shopping at our regular shopping stores is that the fruit and veg are imported, and it's actually not grown locally. And there are certain very interesting studies that are showing that fruit and vegetables that are harvested close by to where you work and live tend to have more nutritious value because that's what your body needs at the time, or that particular season. All right, we also want to add more vitamin D rich foods. So things like salmon, eggs, spinach, kale, mushrooms, and definitely increasing our fiber, which you're going to get if you're increasing your fruit and veggies, or making sure that you're maintaining your fruit and veggies. Maintaining our water intake. And water intake, I must say, I'm really bad at this. 1.5 to 2.5 liters of water is what everybody should be drinking during the day. In winter, if we're stopping at our coffee, or for every cup of coffee, you need to be trying to have extra glass of water to mitigate the dehydration that caffeine may impact on our systems. Of course, ensuring that we get enough sunlight within that first hour or two of waking. And I saw there was a question in the chat around how long should we be spending in the sun in the morning. Andrew Huberman's podcast on sunlight in the mornings, they recommend somewhere between 2 and 20 minutes in the morning will do what you need. If it's only 2 minutes that you have, take those 2 minutes. If you have longer, then take longer. But apparently 2 minutes every morning is what will get your circadian rhythms on the go. Of course, there is this new kind of awareness of hot and cold exposure. So having a warm shower and then turning it on cold so that the body builds up an ability to adapt to the different temperatures. A lot of places gyms offer sauna. Saunas are proving to boost our immune system and do all sorts of wonderful things for our immune systems as well as our nervous system. Light therapy is also, if you are finding that you're not getting to see the sunlight because you're working shift work, or you are going to work early in the morning and late in the evening, light therapy is also available. If you Google it, there are several places in Joburg and Cape Town and sort of the bigger city areas that offer light therapy. And then, of course, as we mentioned earlier, with the slowdown that nature has, how many of us are slowing down? Consciously noticing what kind of rest we need. Well, when I looked at rest, I realized that we kind of think that rest is, getting to bed and sleeping our 7 to 8 hours. Yes, that is important. But there are other types of rest that are equally important to getting a good night's sleep. I'm going to mention 7 of them. And I want you to see if you can relate to any of these that you might be experiencing. And the first one is physical rest. And there are 2 different types of physical rest. The one is really slowing things down, like taking a nap. And then there's active rest, like doing a yoga class or going for a stretch class, or using a foam roller to massage your body, or going for a massage. Equally, you could have one of those massage machines. They work equally well. This one is the most common one, and very often people who have burnout are getting enough physical rest. It's all the other types of rest that they're not giving themselves. So let's have a look at the other ones that maybe don't cross our minds, right? The second one is mental rest. So this is the ability to just sort of tune out and slow down and stop that mental chatter that when you're going to bed at night, you're dead tired, but your mind doesn't stop going over and over and over again. And so It can also show up when we are lacking in mental rest, that you walk into a room and you've forgotten what you were going there for. So your short-term memory might be impaired. And this could be signaling to you that you need to find a practice that helps you to give your mind a rest. One of the things that Danny and I are going to recommend is trying out non-sleep deep rest as a practice. NSDR, we will give you a link for that if you want to give that a bash. Mindfulness practice or some kind of meditation can also help. Coloring in is also a useful way to allow your mind to just do something but not be necessarily thinking, so you can just zone out. The next type of rest that we also take for granted is social rest. So many of us are so busy meeting the needs of our families, our partners, our children, our managers, our staff, that we are not realizing how much of our energy we're giving out to others. And so here, social rest is about taking time out for yourself and nurturing your energy through people who actually lift you up. I'm sure you can all relate to knowing somebody or having had a conversation with somebody that when you walk away, it feels like the life force has been sapped out of you. Whereas other people, you walk away from them and you feel like you've had this energy infused with yours and you've got a little upbeatness. And so social rest is just managing your energy around when do you need to just conserve energy and when do you need to surround yourself with people who can help improve your mood and your energy levels. The fourth type of rest that we often take for granted is spiritual rest. Now, spiritual rest would be different for different people based on your belief systems. But in general, spiritual rest is finding peace in that your existence is meaningful and purposeful. When we feel like we're doing work that's contributing towards improving the lives of others or in service or creating something that is adding value in the world in some way, we are able to find spiritual rest. People who wake up in the mornings and feel like there is a lack of purpose and meaning in their lives tend to experience burnout and exhaustion. The fifth type of rest that we kind of take for granted is sensory rest. So this is the opportunity to downgrade the endless impact of everything that is stimulating our senses. So it can be the bright lights. It could be the buzz of the air conditioner. It could be the eternal pinging of your cell phone or notifications that an email has come in. It is creating a space for you to have a reduction in this sensory overload and stimulation. And so sometimes just a change in environment can be helpful. I know there have been times where I've been sitting at my desk and at the end of the day, I feel so irritated, agitated, and overwhelmed. And the next day I have elected to go and sit somewhere else in my home. And I have found that the different stimulation in that room, in terms of my visual cues, in terms of the lighting, help my nervous system to recalibrate itself. So many of us are unaware of these eternal incoming information that are happening in the background. The sixth type of rest that we are encouraging you to look at is emotional rest. Emotional rest happens when we're able to authentically express our feelings and to reduce our people-pleasing behaviors. This is where we find emotional rest. And so many of us are carrying feelings of frustration and anxiety or fears that we don't mention to anybody else. And taking a break, talking to somebody, talking to a good friend. These are ways in which to create that space for emotional rest. And the last one that I'd like to suggest, or that is suggested here, is creative rest. And this is the opportunity to experience beauty that inspires you, that can enable us to feel a sense of wonder. And this is often felt by being at the sea or being outside in the sunshine in a beautiful meadow, observing a rose, taking note of things that may be beautiful to you, that would inspire us to think more creatively. And when we have a lack of creative rest, you would notice that you are struggling to problem solve or come up with innovative ideas. And if you are there, so how do you create this for yourself where you can be in a place of beauty that inspires you to think differently or to experience your world a little bit from a different perspective? If you're curious in which of these rests your body needs most, at the bottom of this slide, you will see a little website link to do a quiz on what kind of rest you are needing. And Danny and I both did this quiz, and we were fascinated by the response. And we thought we better really get serious about what kind of rest we need.
Anissa, I wonder if you can. We got a question
Yes,
that I think may be quite applicable to a lot of people on the chat. It was sent to us privately, so I'll keep it anonymous. But in a fast-paced environment with high demands at work, plus then at home with toddlers, how would you recommend one slows down? Which rest would you recommend focusing on?
That's a tough one. With regards to that question, I would recommend to take this quiz to see where you're losing the most energy, which rest is lacking the most, because it would be for each individual. Perhaps for this person, it might be spending 10 minutes in the garden while somebody's looking after the little one, or it could potentially be taking 10 minutes once you're at the office to take a stroll somewhere quiet in the pause area. But even if it is just 10 minutes of carving out some time for yourself, it really is critical to slow down. Perhaps it's not possible for the whole day, but taking snippets of time where you are, if you're driving somewhere, to just mindfully allow your body to soften and ease, and not to be in that embodied state of go, 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 go. That I can take a few deep breaths. Even a breathing practice could assist while you're with your toddler, to be more present and to slow down. And perhaps that's when you're feeding your toddler, that consciously slowing down the process of feeding the child. So it can be in many different places and opportunities. Because once we're on that very hyped up fast pace, it is actually quite difficult to do one of those activities slower.
Yeah, and when you're in that hyped fast pace, you actually get to a point you don't even realize that you need rest. You just go, 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 go. I like the idea of sitting in a car and taking the time in a car to rest. I know that, for me, listening to really nice music that I really enjoy and make me happy is a form of rest for me. It's sparking things inside of me which calm me down. I just want to see this Robin question. 15. Oh, thanks, Robin, for your recommendation, and Rocco for putting the quiz in the chat box. Everybody will be receiving these slides and a recording of the session. So panic not, you can rest.
Yeah, and we will put there are a couple of links coming in the slides of some of these suggestions.
Yes.
So Danny, I know you've done some extensive work looking at the emotional symptoms that show up. Can you share with us some of the emotions that we might be experiencing as we are descending into winter?
100%, Lise. Thanks so much. So one of the best and most known impacts from an emotional perspective during the seasons is what we call seasonal affective disorder. Now, it impacts some people, may not impact everybody, but it's worthwhile mentioning because it's so widely spread. So this seasonal affective disorder is actually a type of depression that you experience in particular seasons and times of the year. It can happen in winter and summer, autumn, or spring. I've done a winter and a summer comparison for you on the slide here, which compares some of the emotions that might come up through these seasonal changes. If we look at some of the things that come out in winter that are particularly not in summer, things like sadness come up in winter, frequent crying, fatigue and lethargy. I know for me, this fatigue and lethargy thing is a big thing, particularly in that 3 o'clock time of the day when I'm really in the mood for a snack of some sort. Difficulty concentrating, especially if the weather outside is cold. You didn't want to get out of bed to come to work in the first place. It's hard to concentrate. Sleeping more than usual. I'm pretty sure if we did a survey, 90% of the people on the call struggle to get out of bed in winter in the morning. It's so much easier to just stay all warm and snuggly.
And hit snooze.
And hit snooze one more time. A lack of energy. It's cold. You want to recluse more than be out there like you do in the summer. There's decreased levels of activity. So we're moving our body less. Everything is constricting more. That's why it's so important to keep that activity up during the winter months.
And Danny, also, if I could just add in there, if I could just come in there, when you're shivering and you're really cold, your whole body is tight and intense. As your body is naturally trying to warm up. So if we don't do some exercise that helps us to shift and to stretch our bodies to warm our core temperature up, we may be more inclined to suffer from seasonal affective disorder in the winter.
Yeah, 100%. And your mobility is impacted by not moving your body as well. And that leads back to your what are they called? Your veins, not your veins. What did I call them? I've forgotten the word now, but they constrict.
Yes, it is.
So there's less blood flow going to extremities.
Yeah.
Craving sugar and carbohydrates during the winter. I've spoken to that. Weight gain or weight loss. Your whole diet is more likely to change in the winter. When we look at things like the summer, irritability could come about. When we hot and uncomfy, we bothered. Weight loss might come about. Insomnia, it's different from winter. Winter, we want to sleep more and hibernate more, whereas in summer months, it's harder to fall asleep. Agitation, restlessness, and anxiety all show up in the summer for us. So what are some of the reasons or causes that could why these emotional impacts come about? Now, when you get these slides, you'd be able to click on that possible causes to read the full article that was released on this. But one of the biggest things was the effect of light. Now, when light hits your eye, on the back of your eye, it sends messages to a part of your brain that controls your sleep, your appetite, your sex drive, and your temperature. And if there isn't enough light, these functions can actually slow down. So that's resetting of your circadian rhythm early in the morning, whether it's just being close to sunlight or indirect sunlight, not looking at it. But that light that hits your eye really does reset your whole system. Disturbances in your body clock. Now, as Lisa and I hit that snooze button every winter morning, we're causing major disturbances within our bodies. Our bodies struggle more every time we hit that snooze button. It's even harder the next day to get up, and then harder the following day thereafter. Problems with melatonin and serotonin could also be another thing. Now, as we mentioned in the circadian rhythm slide, your melatonin is a hormone produced by your brain to help slow down your brain and actually activate your sleeping mechanism within your body. Now, that speeds up within the winter months. Whereas your serotonin levels, which are happy, your endorphins, your happy hormones, they all go down within your winter months. Weather and the temperature could also be a cause. We mentioned it being warm and snuggly in bed and cold outside. Just go outside. That could be, you can run the risk of having some seasonal affective disorder. Now, there's some less common, but things that are happening within our everyday worlds that agitate the seasonal affective disorder. And I want to also emphasize that your seasonal affective disorder also has a spectrum. So there's a mild of it and there's a severe of it as well. Things like socially withdrawing yourself from social settings, those could have an impact on your social seasonal affective disorder. High stress levels, problems at school or work, or in your life in general, financial problems, all these kinds of things agitate. Taking drugs, whether narcotic or prescribed. Alcohol, also big impact, and it could really drive the impacts of seasonal affective disorder and cause all these emotional responses. Other mental disorders such as anxiety, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts, and suicidal behavior are also seen within seasonal affective disorder. I don't know about you, Lisa, but I'm sure everybody on the call now wants to hear a little bit of positivity after this greatness. How can we resolve this seasonal affective disorder if it comes up for us?
Again, really simple things that kind of we take for granted. And the first one that I really encourage people to do is to do something creative. Whether that is doing something for woodwork or a brainstorming session, or in my case, I go to the Clay Cafe, and Danny, you have come with me on many occasions. Making something that pleases you is really helpful to just zone out, clear out the mental clutter, and just invest some energy in making something that you like. Talking to a close and trusted friend, diaphragmatic breathing. I can't emphasize more how just taking a long, slow a sigh of relief out can shift and change our body's anxiety levels and reduce them. Deeper, longer, slower inhales also reduce our acidity levels in our body, and so therefore it will reduce inflammation, which, as you mentioned earlier, is a side effect of winter, is that we often become a little bit more inflamed inside. Robin, I love your idea of baking something nice. Yes, if you want to do something creative, something healthy, nice, hopefully. And then, of course, to practice some kind of mindfulness meditation or non-sleep deep rest, also very helpful. Speaking to a professional, and at Kaelo, we have professional services that are available to you if you are connected, that we will share with you at the end of the webinar.
Apologies
puzzles,
there, just been load shedding. Just give me a second to get the slides back up.
Sure, no problem. Kerry's made a suggestion of doing puzzles. I love that. What a great idea. Kerry, I'm going to add that to our slide. That and bake something nice are such beautiful ideas. I know building a puzzle is a great calming experience for me. And it also just takes your mind out of the everyday, right? So Dan, while we're waiting for that slide to come back up, I'm going to just share with you a couple of other things that are very helpful in steering ourselves away from SAD. And that is setting a new goal for yourself, whether it is a goal at work or a personal goal. Deciding that in the summertime you're going to be ready to run a 5K. Or whatever it is that makes you feel motivated. Think about setting a goal for yourself. Set an event that you could look forward to. So maybe it's a weekend away. Maybe in the middle of June, a weekend away, somewhere warm and cozy. Maybe something lovely to look forward to. I also would like to suggest that reflecting on your mindsets and your thoughts that might be limiting you could be a helpful exercise as we turn our focus away from the outside world internally. And what are the things that have enabled you to be successful in the summertime versus what you would like to improve upon and shift and change, bringing into the spring. Spending time in nature, always a place for us to revitalize and rejuvenate ourselves. Listening to soothing music, as Danny mentioned earlier. And we've put a link into the slide that I know you can't see right now. But this is a link to self-reflect through journaling. And it is a a suggestion that emerges from Tim Ferriss, who's one of my favorite gurus around how to be productive and creative. Are we still here? We are, right? Suddenly gone quiet, but I see you there, Dan. Great. All right. Great to see you there. And the last, you'll see this link is over here. And Tim Ferriss uses a journaling process called the morning journal, morning pages, where you wake up in the morning and you just take 2 or 3 pages and you just write your stream of consciousness. Whatever your mind is thinking about, you're putting onto a page. Before you touch your cell phone, before you, well, maybe you would have gone to the loo first, but you want to capture the first thoughts and how to use this process to self-reflect and notice what is happening in your mind, because most of us wake up in the morning and we reach, I'm guilty of this, so I'm not preaching here, this is for my own self talk. It's one thing I want to change this winter. Instead of reaching for my phone and putting that blue light into my eyes, is to rather capture what is my mind, what is that first stream of consciousness that's emerging in the mornings, and then to review it over a week and to notice, where is my mind? What am I feeling emotionally? What's coming up for me every day? And then, of course, the last one would be around speaking to a professional. So if you don't feel that your social circle is a place that's helping you, and you perhaps want to think about talking to a life coach or to some kind of a therapist, I'm going to invite Danny to share with us some of the access points via Ask Nelson.
Thanks, Lise. Thanks so much. I wanted to just mention before I go into the access points that the planning an event to look forward to and actually having that event as a mental self-care tool really helps me. So I recently had a weekend away in Cape Town with a bunch of my girlfriends. And for months we were looking forward to it and couldn't speak about anything else. And when it was happening, and we almost had to pinch ourselves that it was so good to have everybody around us, from all parts of the country, and some from overseas even, together, and debrief and reflect on what's happening with my friends. It really did the world of good for me. Set me up for a great couple of weeks coming up. So I definitely love that suggestion. If we look at speaking to professional, if you are a Ask Nelson client, or if you're employed by an Ask Nelson client, you do have access to the Ask Nelson services. Your family also has access to the Ask Nelson services. Our family, anyone who's either financially dependent on you or they live under your roof and or also has access to 24-hour, 365 days a year in all South African languages. Counseling, coaching, there's legal advice as well as financial advice on various access points. So I want to encourage you to take a photo of the screen if you don't have the number, and utilize the service to maybe, I see some of the people put in comments on our chat box to say they've just gone through and done the rest test, Lise. A couple of people coming through with really high scores. If you want some tips and tricks on how to better that personally for yourself, chat to someone. You can get coached into resting and how to rest well. So definitely make contact with the Ask Nelson team. Lisa, if I could just extend a warm thank you to you for today. I know that it's been long hours putting this together, so I so appreciate all your time and knowledge being put into it. It's been so wonderful to present with you. We are going to stick around for the last 5 minutes to answer if there are any questions that come through. But from my side, thank you so much for attending. I hope you've gotten some tips and tricks that you can take back with you into your world.
Yeah, thank you, Danny, and thank you for the opportunity. I just loved unsurfacing for myself some of the things that happened to me that I take so for granted, and am intending to implement myself. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everybody who's been participating in the chat. Some really great ideas. And Rocco, thank you for several comments and inputs that you've made. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, and thanks for the patience with the load shedding on hitting on both of our sides.
Yeah. Jeez.
Going to need to do some of those rest tricks after this webinar.
Definitely some deep breathing.
So you will receive in probably by the end of the week, you'll receive a link to the recording of this webinar. If you don't receive the email for whatever reason, it will be up on the Kaelo website. I posted a link of the Kaelo website onto the chat box. So the recording will be available as well as the slides as well. Just want to run through the chat box to make sure we haven't missed anything. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon if you're leaving us.